Okay, picture this. You're introduced to someone new, they smile, tell you their name, you're looking right at them, and then, literally seconds later, the name is just completely gone. It's a universal, honestly, incredibly awkward phenomenon. So, welcome to today's explainer. We are going to dive into the cognitive detective work needed to master our memories and finally put an end to instant name amnesia for good.
Right off the bat, we've all felt that silent internal panic when a name just vanishes into thin air right in the middle of a handshake. It immediately makes you wonder, is there something wrong with my memory? I want to validate that feeling right now, but also give you some massive reassurance right up front. No, your brain is absolutely not broken. There's a very specific biological reason this happens. Here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the actual phenomenon of instant name amnesia. Second, we'll dive into the neuroscience of forgetting. Third, we'll explain why your brain is actually working exactly as it should. And finally, we'll equip you with a 5-part scientific toolkit for memory mastery.
All right, Part 1, the instant name amnesia. Let's start with why names are inherently so unbelievably slippery for our brains to hold on to. Think about the core issue here. A face has distinct shapes, it has emotion. A voice has tone and pitch. These give our brains solid, concrete visual and auditory data. But a name, by itself, a name is entirely abstract. It's essentially meaningless data with absolutely no built-in visual image for your brain to grab onto. It's like trying to hold on to water.
Moving to Part 2, the neuroscience of forgetting. Let's look under the hood at the exact milliseconds of a social interaction to see what goes wrong on a biological level. When someone says their name, that abstract little piece of data drops straight into your working memory, which is controlled by the prefrontal cortex. You can think of working memory as a very, very limited waiting room in your brain. It holds information temporarily, sure, but it is incredibly easy to disrupt. Now, think about the sheer amount of multitasking your brain is forced to do during an introduction. You aren't just listening to a name, right? Your brain is super busy making sure you're keeping appropriate eye contact, figuring out what on earth you're going to say next, judging the interaction, and managing your own self-awareness. All of this simultaneous processing creates what's essentially a cascade of mild social stress.
And here is where it gets crazy. This mild social stress actually raises your cortisol levels. And cortisol directly interferes with the hippocampus, which is the exact part of your brain responsible for converting short-term information into long-term memory. Because of this cortisol block, the name simply never gets stored. It literally vanishes because the memory encoding process was interrupted before it could even finish its job.
Which brings us to Part 3. Your brain is not broken. If you take away anything from today's explainer, let it be this next section. We really have to separate normal encoding failures from true memory loss. Look, in neurodegenerative conditions, people experience physiological problems within the brain that cause them to forget highly familiar people, places, and events. But with instant name amnesia, the name was simply never fully encoded in the first place. The data wasn't lost, it just never made it into the filing cabinet. This distinction is absolutely crucial.
Plus, there are everyday environmental factors that make this so much worse. Things like fatigue, dehydration, and poor sleep reduce your neurotransmitter efficiency. When you're rushing or stressed out, it literally pulls brain activity away from the hippocampus and pushes it toward the amygdala. This isn't cognitive decline. It is purely a resource allocation issue. Your tired brain just has fewer resources to give to that temporary waiting room.
So, I really want you to shift your mindset right now. Your brain isn't broken. It's actually being highly efficient. In overwhelming social moments, it prioritizes immediate survival and complex social processing over storing random, abstract labels. Once you understand that, you can finally stop blaming yourself and start actually working with your brain instead of fighting it.
All right, let's fix this. Part 4, 5 techniques for mastery. Let's dive into the actual solution phase and give you the exact steps to encode these names properly.
Here is your 5-part mastery toolkit. Repetition, visual anchoring, movement, emotional tagging, and timing. By intentionally slowing down the introduction and using these steps, we can completely bypass the brain's natural filters. Let's break them down.
Technique number 1 is repetition and engagement. When someone tells you their name, say it back out loud exactly 1 time, not 5 times, just once.
Speaking the name out loud activates entirely different motor and auditory brain circuits beyond just hearing alone. This instantly increases the strength of the memory by forcing your brain to process the data in multiple ways.
Technique number 2 is visual anchoring. Remember how we said names are abstract and have no built-in image? Well, your hippocampus remembers pictures way better than words. So take that abstract name and mentally attach it to a concrete physical feature you see on the person. Maybe it's their cool glasses, a specific facial feature, or even how they're standing. You are actively turning abstract data into something concrete.
Technique number 3 is movement. Doing something as simple as making a tiny physical action, like gently tapping your finger, shifting your weight, or just giving a deliberate nod, fires up the motor networks in your brain. When memory, movement, and attention fire together, encoding goes through the roof. This subtle movement causes a spike in acetylcholine and dopamine, which chemically flags the data, telling your brain, hey, this is highly important.
Technique number 4 is emotional tagging. Emotion is basically superglue for your memory, and you don't need some intense, dramatic emotion to make this work. Even a mild, intentional spark of interest does the trick. Silently telling yourself, this person matters, or I really want to remember this name, creates a clear intention that ramps up hippocampal engagement. It acts like an emotional sticky note for the new memory.
And finally, technique number 5 is timing. The window of opportunity to encode a name is incredibly brief. We're talking literally the first few seconds. If you miss that window because you're busy worrying about what to say next, your brain simply dumps the data and moves on. That's why trying to recall a name even 1 minute later feels so impossible. You absolutely have to catch it early and apply these techniques right in those first crucial seconds.
By slowing the moment down just a tiny bit to say the name once, tie it to a visual, add a subtle movement, and set a quick intention, you are giving your brain the exact tools it needs to store that information securely. So what does this all mean for you? Well, who's going to be the very first person to experience your new cognitive upgrade? Try combining these 5 techniques during your very next introduction and experience the incredible relief of true mastery over your own mind. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.